Who's the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn.
How are you doing? Lovely to see you.
At this point, I should point out that the audience members have been carefully selected to provide balance. A third are declared Conservative supporters, a third are for Labour and a third are undecided. So let's get started with our first question, which comes from Ines.
Mr Corbyn, in your speech following the Manchester attack last Friday, you stated that no government can prevent every terrorist attack and that we need a foreign policy that reduces rather than increases the threat to this country. Islamic State have clearly stated that anyone who doesn't abide by their ideology is their enemy. So why should we soften our foreign policy if it is blatantly obvious that there is no room for negotiation?
It's not about softening our foreign policy. It is about absolutely condemning what happened in Manchester. Innocent lives were taken, young women and girls out enjoying themselves for the evening. That's the society we live in. That's the society I want to live in. And nobody should be allowed to take that away from anybody. The person who committed it did an appalling and abominable and atrocious act, as did apparently those that were conspiring with him. The police investigation is ongoing. My point was that we have to have a foreign policy around the world that doesn't leave large areas without any effective government, such as in Libya at the present time, which can become a breeding ground of a place of enormous danger to all of us, and indeed any Western country in Europe or in North America. My point was absolute condemnation. My point was that we need more police, not less. That's why we're pledged to provide 10,000 more police on our streets, and that we wanted a foreign policy that didn't leave large areas of the world ungoverned, so that we had a more secure future for all of us. And do not allow this to become an attack on our multicultural society or on the wonderful faith of Islam. This is a perversion of Islam, that what was done in Manchester, as indeed other attacks have been. What we need is a strategy that protects us, but a foreign policy that engages with the rest of the world as well, to bring about a safer world for all of us.
I just want to throw that back at Ines. Does that satisfy you?
I think it's just, in terms of foreign policy, you know, are you going to look the other way if there's any military intervention that is needed in that area to support the coalition that are fighting IS?
Well, the coalitions that are dealing with IS in Syria are complex, and they're sometimes fighting each other as well. My whole point is that we have to cut off the funds for IS, cut off the arms for IS, cut off their publicity as far as we can, but also bring about a peace process in Syria by reconvening the Geneva talks, including all the neighbouring countries as well as Iran, but also bring about a constructive dialogue in Libya so that we don't have huge areas of that country with all its oil wealth underneath it, ungoverned and a prey for this kind of thing. There are desperate people in Libya living in refugee camps. Let's give them something positive and some hope by bringing about stability in that country. It's up to all of us to engage with that, because if there is ungoverned spaces around the world, then actually everybody's under threat.
Well, let's move it on. A related question from Callum McNeill.
Good evening, Mr Corbyn. The horrific events in Manchester are not the first time this nation has faced terrorism. You and two of your senior colleagues openly supported the IRA. How can we really trust you in stopping terrorism?
I wanted dialogue in Northern Ireland during the 1970s and 1980s. I did make contact with Sinn Féin when they were not allowed to travel, their leadership was not allowed to travel to Britain, for example. I wanted there to be a process. And that peace process came about by the actions of people such as John Hume, such as Gerry Adams, such as David Trimble, who eventually brought about the ceasefires with both governments, both the Conservative and later with the Tony Blair-led Labour government. And that brought about the Good Friday Agreement, which respects all the historical traditions of Ireland, which is obviously fundamental to bring about peace. And I think we should all be pleased that we've achieved a great deal through the Good Friday Agreement. And you know what? That Good Friday process, recognising those differences, has become a bit of a model for peace processes around the world, where people who were not talking to each other, worse than that, now travel the world together in order to promote peace and dialogue in the Middle East, in Colombia, and in the past in South Africa. I think we should be pleased about those achievements.
Is it worth clarifying for Callum? Did you vote for the Good Friday Agreement?
Yes, I did. Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, well,
yes.
Let's talk about something. I mean, Callum talks about, can we trust you on stopping terrorist threats? Let's talk about something practical. Armed police officers. Do you think there should be fewer? Do you think there should be more? The same? None?
I think there should be what is necessary in order to save and protect life. I want to live in a society that is safe and secure. Ideally, nobody wants to see armed police officers anywhere. The reality is, at the moment, they are there and they have been necessary.
Just a quick comeback, Callum.
With all due respect, Mr. Corbyn, you didn't actually answer my question. You have openly supported the IRA in the past. And I can give you an example. Attending a commemoration for the 8 IRA men who were killed at Loughgall. Now, in your words, it was to honour them. Maybe you can share with the electorate why those IRA men were actually killed.
The commemoration I think you're referring to was a meeting I was at in London where there was a period of silence for everyone who had died in Northern Ireland.
Mr. Corbyn, the event was actually to commemorate the people who were killed in Loughgall. And the reason they were killed in Loughgall was they were on their way to kill British policemen.
And the contribution I made to that meeting was to call for a peace and dialogue process in Northern Ireland. It's only by dialogue and process we brought about the peace in Northern Ireland, and I think that is a good thing. And I think going forward we need to make sure that in the Brexit negotiations there is no return or to any kind of hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic.
OK, thank you, Callum. John Dare. John.
Mr. Corbyn, like many voters, I approve of many of the policies in your manifesto. The problem I have is that I don't see you as someone who could effectively run this country. How can you convince me that you're the man for the job?
We wrote this manifesto, which I'm glad you approve of, by consensus within the Labour Party and our affiliated groups and organisations, and from the contribution of hundreds of non-affiliated political groups who have very important views to communicate to us. We've put those forward, and in government, we will carry this manifesto out. This manifesto is about investing in our future. It is about investing in our young people for the future so that we don't have supersized classrooms, we don't have massive waiting lists in hospitals, we don't have 1 million people waiting for social care, we don't have thousands of people sleeping on our streets. The choice is quite clearly there. This manifesto, investing for the future, taxing more a bit, for corporation tax and for the very wealthiest, 95% will pay no more, or you can go down the road of continuing austerity, continuing cuts in all areas of public expenditure, and an ever-widening gap between the richest and the poorest in our society. I am very proud of this manifesto, proud to lead this party, and you know what? I'll be very proud to put this manifesto into action by legislation and by government. And I'm looking forward to the chance of doing it.
Mr. Corbyn, John's question was actually, he likes the manifesto, but it was your own leadership he was questioning. Could you just address that to John?
Well, I'm sure when John and I get to know each other, we'll get along fine, and we'll get to like each other. I'm sure we will. John, people have perceptions about each other. But you know what? In life, I meet lots of people. Some I agree with, some I disagree with, some I profoundly disagree with. But I always want to get to know them, because everybody I meet and everybody you meet knows something we don't know. You should never be so high and mighty you can't listen to somebody else and learn something from them. To me, leadership is as much about using this as using this.
OK, Roxanne. Moving on to Roxanne. Where's Roxanne? Roxanne, there we go.
Hi, Mr. Corbyn. I'd like to know, for people like myself who voted to leave the European Union and have voted Labour in the past, how are you planning to deal with immigration? The Conservatives have pledged a number. Why won't you?
When we leave the European Union, we accept the results of the referendum. It's taken place. It's happened. We accept it. And The priority has to be negotiating tariff-free trade access to the European market to protect jobs in this country. That we will do. It also has to be about the future relationship with Europe, because they are, after all, our very close neighbours. On the issue you mentioned of immigration, the free movement is implicit in membership of the European Union. It obviously stops when we leave the European Union. In the future, there has to be managed migration, and it has to be based on the needs of this country and our economy and of the rights of family reunion. I'm not going to stand here and put a figure. Our Prime Minister has done that now in the third election running and has got nowhere near meeting that figure. I would say we have to have managed migration. We have to have protection of EU nationals living here, just as much as there should be protection of British nationals, of which there are very many living in other parts of Europe. But we should also remember that if people hadn't migrated to this country, we would have a much worse health service, education system and transport system than we have. The contribution that's made to your living standards and mine by people who have come here is huge. But I'll tell you what will change. We will not allow companies to bring in whole groups of very low-paid workers in order to undercut often fairly low-paid workers in this country, thus destroying their working conditions. And so that is part of that managed process. At the moment, we have some disgraceful undercutting and we have huge impacts on different communities. The other point I just make in finality on this, going to see Faisal's moving his hands, is that we would also reinstate something that Gordon Brown introduced when he was Prime Minister, which was an impact fund for communities that had had an influx of new residents and needed support on vital local services. And so we accept the result, we negotiate with Europe, we have a good relationship with Europe, and we manage our own future.
Just help Roxanne out here. You won't give a number, but the current net figure is 248,000. Higher, lower,
well,
the same?
I would have thought under a managed migration system, it certainly wouldn't go up anymore. It would probably, but I don't want to be held to this, come down. That's a probability. But I would say we have to recognise that we do have serious skill shortages in this country because we have not invested enough in education and training for a very long time in this country. We need to turn that around.
Miranda. Where's Miranda? Miranda.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, Miranda. How are you doing?
By contrast, I'm a Remain voter, and I feel that the Labour response to Brexit has been lacklustre. I don't really see a big difference between the Tory and Labour responses, but it's a really big issue for me. Can you tell me why I should vote Labour instead of Lib Dem as part of the 48%?
Because we have to accept the reality of the result of the referendum. It happened. It was a democratic choice. More people voted in that than any other recorded vote in our history. And so it's there. It's a decision. That doesn't mean we're leaving the European Union. It doesn't mean we're leaving Europe as a continent. It's still there, obviously, and we're going to have a relationship with it. I've said, and in answer to our friend over there, I said that we would guarantee the rights of European Union nationals in Britain to remain here. And indeed, within days of the referendum, Andy Burnham, who was then our Shadow Home Secretary, proposed that resolution in the House of Commons, and it was in fact carried by a huge majority because the Conservatives chose not to take part. There's going to be a relationship with Europe. Our universities must have a close relationship with Europe. We will defend working rights such as working time directive, paternal leave, maternity leave, all those very important things we've gained from the European Union. We'll protect those in the future. And we will also remain part of a number of very important agencies such as policing and intelligence sharing, as well as environmental protocols. It's no good one side of a sea polluting it and the other side not. You've both got to agree not to pollute the sea. You have to work together to achieve things. So what I say to you is, the result is there. It happened. Let's build a sensible, good, tariff-free trade relationship with Europe. Every car that's made in Britain, or most of the cars that are made in Germany, the parts come from both sides of the channel. You could say the same with aircraft. You could say the same with an awful lot of other manufacturing industry. That's going to carry on, and it will have to carry on. Otherwise, we'll destroy our own manufacturing industry. But I'll tell you what we won't do. We won't threaten Europe with turning this country into a sort of corporate tax haven with low tax, low wages and low investment. We want high wage, high investment, growing economy with good relations with our neighbours and indeed, of course, with the rest of the world.
Well, on that, Where's
Good evening, Jeremy.
Evening.
I'm a proud Mancunian and a small business owner brought up in a Labour voting household by salt-of-the-earth parents who gave me their best. Why have you made it impossible for me to vote Labour in this election with your ruthless, short-sighted policies such as 26% corporation tax, the abolishment of zero-hour contracts, £10 an hour minimum wage, and now you want to put VAT on my children's school fees?
Corporation tax was 28% in 2010. This government has reduced it and proposes to reduce it further. We're going to put it back up to 26%. And why are we doing that? Because this country is badly divided between the richest and the poorest. You put corporate tax and tax at the top end down, the division gets greater. Are you happy that so many of our children are going to school with supersized classes? So many of our children are going to school hungry. Are you happy with so many people waiting for hospital operations, 1 million waiting for social care? You don't address these problems by ignoring them. I appeal to you, as obviously a traditional person who supported our party, recognise that we're all better off when everybody is better off. And your children want to get a home of their own in the future. If we build the homes for them, both to rent as well as to buy, then they've got a better chance. Your children, I'm sure, would like to go to university. I do not believe we should charge fees for our students to go to universities because we all benefit from them graduating and becoming well-qualified citizens. So what we're proposing in this manifesto is transformational, because for the first time for many years, we're saying this younger generation should not be worse off than we are or ones that went before. They should actually be better off. This is about rejigging the way that we run our economy. But I'd also say to anyone running a small business, I work with small businesses. I talk to them. I listen very carefully to what they have to say. They are often very badly exploited by much bigger business who delay on payments, often don't pay at all, and force them out of business. We want a society and an economy that invests and a legal system that protects those that are working really hard. Surely a £10 an hour minimum wage, a living wage, a real living wage by 2020 would mean we actually spend probably a bit less on working tax credits, but it would also make an awful lot of people a lot better off. And do you know what? They'd spend the money in the local economy. It would be something that would be good for all of us. I appeal to you, think again. How did we get our welfare state in Britain? How did we get our National Health Service? We got it because the Labour Party was bold enough in the post-war period to invest in the future.
Mr. Corbyn.
Our Labour government will do the same.
We're just trying to get one more. David Gerard. David. Where's David?
Hi. This way. Okay. Given your long-standing support for nuclear disarmament, would you be prepared to use the nuclear deterrent, and if so, in what circumstances?
I want to live in a world that's free of the danger of a nuclear holocaust. Any nuclear weapon used anywhere in the world is a disaster for all of us. And I've spent my life working with peace organisations, working with the United Nations over the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in order to bring about global disarmament. I would see my responsibility as our Prime Minister to contribute to a world of peace in the future. That means being very serious about the dangers, very serious about promoting what China is trying to achieve in Korea with the six-party talks, be very serious in what President Obama achieved with his agreement with Iran, but also look at the other threats that we face as well. Cyber attacks are very serious. We saw that with the attack on our National Health Service only a couple of weeks ago. Random acts of terror, such as we saw in Manchester, are a real threat as well. We have to defend our way of life, our society and our country by an intelligent engagement with the rest of the world. And I want to bring about our contribution to a more peaceful world.
Can I just use the practical implication of David's question, which is in 11 days' time, you could be Prime Minister and you would have to write those letters of last resort to the Trident submarine commanders. Are you going to write those letters?
I will write the appropriate letter to our commanders, who are obviously very responsible, very loyal naval officers.
OK. Well, that brings us to the end of our first question and answer session of the evening. Thank you very much, Mr Corbyn.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Coming next, Mr Corbyn head-to-head with Jeremy Paxman.